Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Zimacube Pro. This is a new device from Icewhale, the company that have already brought us the Zima board and Zima blade that I've reviewed previously. The Zimacube Pro is the second device from their Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign, which was successfully funded in December last year. It's marketed as being a personal cloud server with easy to use software and is slightly higher spec than the standard Zimacube from the same campaign. It's got an i5 processor instead of the N100 in the standard cube, so that allows for faster RAM, better PCIe expansion, faster M.2 ports, and significantly better connectivity. That comes at a price though. The Pro version retails for $1,099, a significant step up of $450 from the standard version. Included in the box are some tools, a 10GB network cable, a Thunderbolt 4 cable, power adapter, and some screws for mounting the drives into the drive bays. Taking a look around the Zimacube Pro, on the front we've got two USB 3.0 ports, a USB Type-C port, a 3.5mm audio jack, and then the power button. Below that, it's got 6 SATA drive bays along the front, which can take 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives. And then the 7th tray has 4 M.2 ports for NVMe drives. The 7th tray also has customizable and programmable RGB lighting, with an onboard controller that you can load custom firmware onto. It also has 2 internal M.2 ports, with one being for the storage NVMe drive. So that's a total of 6 SATA ports and 6 M.2 ports, which allow for up to 164 TB of connected storage. This ventilation screen that covers the bays looks great when it's installed, but it could really do with a small tab or recess on the edges to make it easier to remove. The sides both have ventilation holes at the top and then 2 screws holding the top cover in place. On the back we've got a reset button, the power input, 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 10GB Ethernet port, 2 2.5GB Ethernet ports, 2 more USB 3.0 ports, a DisplayPort 1.4 and an HDMI port. The Thunderbolt 4 port allows the Zimacube to be used as a DAS, or direct attached storage device. This is a feature that's not commonly found on consumer level products, so I'm interested to see how well this works. They claim that you can get up to 2 GB per second transfer speed through this port, so we'll definitely be testing that out. Internally powering the Zimacube Pro is a 12th gen Intel Core i5 processor with 10 cores. This particular one has 32 GB of DDR5 RAM, but it can be expanded up to 64 GB. We've got dual PCIe slots, one being PCI 4.0x4 and the other PCI 3.0x2. These allow you to add expansion cards like a GPU, AI acceleration card, or a transcoding card to improve the Zimacube's performance for your particular workflow. Our M.2 NVMe OS drive is partially hidden by the cooler. This M.2 port near the back has a 10GB Ethernet adapter plugged into it. One of the main complaints early users have had is around the Zimacube's cooling solution. It's claimed to be quite loud and not very effective. Icewhale have responded with a free issue improved cooling solution for backers. This is apparently quite easy to swap out. We'll test this and the currently installed cooler to compare the results. As with other Icewhale products, it's intended to be used with their operating system. In this case, it comes preloaded with Zima OS. This is very similar to Casa OS with a few features tailored to the Zimacube. These include RAID support and remote access functionality. You're also not locked into using their software. You can fairly easily install other operating systems like OpenWRT, pfSense, TrueNAS or Unraid. Zima OS is effectively a skin for Docker with a bit of additional functionality and a good support community. It's got a range of pre-configured apps that are very easy to set up. Let's start with testing the old and new CPU cooling solutions. I haven't done anything to the stock cooler, I've left it as it arrived. I'm going to first try a 50% load on the CPU and see what that does to the thermals, and then I'll try 100% load. The temperature is already sitting quite high at idle. We're at 2% utilization and we're already running at over 40 degrees Celsius in a 20 degree room. At 50% load, the temperature spikes to over 90 degrees in about 2 seconds, which is really quite poor. It starts thermal throttling almost instantly, dropping the clock frequency down to 3.5 GHz and then further to 3.3 GHz about 45 seconds later. This brings the temperature down a bit, but it obviously comes at the expense of performance. At 100% load, it's practically useless for sustained use. It spikes up to 100 degrees before the utilization gauge could even increase. And again, this is significantly thermal throttling. This time down to just 2.4 GHz. So this cooler really is undersized or just doesn't work effectively, confirming other users' concerns. I have to also mention that the fans for the drive bay of the Zimacube are quite loud. I haven't installed any drives into the bays and I'm in an air-conditioned room, and the drive bay fans seem to spin up occasionally, so their curves must be set really low. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and you can adjust them in the BIOS. It's just not great if you've got this near you when you're working. The CPU cooler is audible, but isn't that loud when at idle. When it spins up under any sort of load, then it is quite loud. Now let's get the new cooler fitted. It comes with a bracket for the underside of the motherboard, but I believe it uses the same pattern and screws, so we shouldn't need to use this. The old cooler comes off pretty easily. The new cooler has a pre-applied phase change thermal pad on it, so we don't need to reapply the thermal paste. They say that it should be installed with the fan at the back of the Zimacube directed towards the front, which I've now done. Let's boot it up and see if it performs any better. At idle after booting up, we're now running 8 to 9 degrees cooler at 33 to 34 degrees. Again, starting with a 50% load, it now takes about 10 seconds to run over 90 degrees. This is a significant improvement, but it does still start thermal throttling under sustained load. With 100% load, we hit 100 degrees and start thermal throttling again almost instantly. It does sustain a slightly higher CPU frequency for a tiny bit longer, but not that significantly. In terms of fan noise, the new cooler runs a tiny bit louder at idle. But is a bit quieter under full load. So the new cooling solution makes some improvement to the thermals, but if you plan on doing CPU intensive tasks for long periods of time, then you'll probably still want to upgrade the cooling solution. Given how quickly the temperature spikes under full load, I think some of the limitation might actually be with the heat spreader, as it's a painted surface. Now let's get some drives installed into it and do some transfer speed tests. I'm going to install 4 2.5-inch Crucial BX500 SSDs into the main bays, and then 4 Crucial P3 Plus NVMe drives into the M.2 bays. These aren't ideal for a NAS, but they're what I have available for testing. If you're going to be using drives in a NAS long term, then make sure that you get NAS grade drives, and preferably ones with DRAM cache. Our drives now show up in our dashboard, and we can set them up as individual drives or in a RAID configuration. I'm going to go with RAID 5, and I'll set up the NVMe drives in one pool and the SATA drives in a separate pool. I had to reformat the SATA drives as I used them previously for my Pi NAS, and they were already in a RAID configuration that the Zimacube didn't like. Starting with a small 256 MB file on the NVMe storage volume, we get writes of around 700 MB per second, and reads around 900 MB per second. So writes are a bit undersaturating the 10 gig Ethernet connection, but reads are pretty close. I haven't done any optimization or tweaked any settings on the NAS, so this is straight out of the box with very little setup. With 1 gig files we get similar results. Going up to a large 64 gig file, we get similar write speeds, but our read speeds have dropped off quite a bit. I'll have to do some digging to figure out why, but it seems likely that this has to do with the Zimacube's available RAM. The Zimacube is probably not able to write to the NVMe drives fast enough to keep up, so the RAM fills up and the drive speed then becomes the bottleneck. Switching over to the SATA storage volume, For the 256 MB and 1 GB files, we get very similar results to the NVMe drives. But when we go up to 64 gigs, writes start off well, but then drop off quite considerably. We're at about a third of what we got with the NVMe volume. Again, this seems to be the RAM filling up because the drives can't keep up with the write speed. Reading the 64 gig file from the SATA volume, we get similar results to the smaller files, so there are no real issues there. Running some real-world file transfer tests in Windows, we get pretty good results. Copying a 60 gig video file to and from the NVMe storage volume, we get a very stable and sustained 1.1 GB per second writing, and a fairly stable 1.1 GB per second reading. There were 2 occasions where the transfer speed dipped quite a lot, but it picked up again fairly quickly. When directly connected to my Mac over Thunderbolt, I tried the same transfer speed test. The 256 MB file test averaged around 1200 MB per second writes and 1500 MB per second reads, but the results were quite erratic. The 1 gig test file achieved very similar results. The 64 gig file started off writing quite slowly, but then ramped up to 1000 MB per second write, and then achieved faster read times than the previous file sizes, getting up to 1700 MB per second. The Zimacube can also run virtual machines, so you can run multiple operating systems to support different applications and utilities. Plex on the Zimacube handles 4K video playback really well. This obviously depends on how much transcoding is taking place, which is minimal for these sample videos, but they're barely registering on the CPU. Some early users have already developed their own software for the RGB lighting in the 7th tray. It's fully programmable through the onboard ESP32 module, and each of the LEDs are individually addressable, which gives you a lot of options. In terms of power consumption, the Zimacube is rated for 220 watts. I ran 2 tests as the total power draw will be quite dependent on the type and number of drives you've got running. The first test was without any storage drives installed. With this setup I got a power draw of 27 watts when idle, and this peaked to 81 watts under load. With 4 SSDs and 4 NVMe drives installed, I got an average power draw of 34 watts. With the 3.5-inch bays all populated with physical 3.5-inch drives, other users have measured around 50 to 60 watts at idle and around 70 to 80 watts with high CPU utilization. So well under the rated consumption, but it's going to cost a bit to have this running in your home 24/7. Here in Australia, I'd be looking at $8 to $10 a month to keep this running. Overall, I think this is a great way to get started with running your own personal server in your home or small office. ZimaOS as it currently stands is a bit limited, but they're constantly adding new features to it, and its simplicity makes it really easy to get a basic setup running, especially if you're new to running a NAS or home server. If you outgrow ZimaOS, you can also easily transition to a more powerful NAS operating system like TrueNAS or Unraid. There are a couple of things that I think they need to work on. While the new CPU cooler is better than the original, there is still a lot of room for improvement. As I said earlier, this might not even be just the cooler, it's likely the CPU's heat spreader as well. The drive bay fans are also quite noisy, and their curves are set a bit too low. The removable front panel is great for aesthetics, but it could do with some tabs to make it easier to remove. You have to sort of hook your fingernails in underneath the vents to pull it off. It's not difficult to do, but it just feels clumsy. Let me know what you think of the Zimacube Pro in the comment section below, and if there's anything else you'd like to see me test or run on it. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more tech and electronics projects, tutorials and reviews.